thank the Elting Memorial Library, particularly John Girolico, the director, Margaret Stan. Obviously, this wouldn't exist if it wasn't for her. She manages to fix everything in the nick of time, and so on and so forth. So, thank you both for that. And on with the show. Presuming that everybody has seen the movie, I have comments about it, but I'll let you weigh in first, and then I'll chime in after what you have to say. Go for it.
Well, I had seen the movie, I guess when we first started dancing, like 20 years ago. So we actually viewed it last night on VHS because we owned it on VHS. And that was actually, well, first of all, what was embedded in my mind was, of course, the great Nicholas Brothers, but I forgot that there was actually a lot of good dancing throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then the thing that I never noticed before was the opening, which is the dance number? The cakewalk. The cakewalk yes. Dance number. I noticed for the first time, especially in light of all the films we've been watching by Black directors and producers for Black audiences. And here's a movie that is yes, it's a Black cast, but it's a white director. I guess for white audiences. But in the cakewalk, the back of the women's hats was a blackface, basically. And I was shocked by that. I didn't notice that, 20 years ago. And I also didn't know, well, I guess I noticed 20 years ago, but I wasn't as woke. But the Black actors wearing blackface.
Yes. I was hoping people would notice that. Actually, it's kind of hard to miss. There are two actors there who are at least two actors that are in blackface. And that's actually real. Back then and before, Black actors sometimes had to wear blackface. And this is surprising. Even if a Black actor was in radio, he still wore blackface. All right. Why? I don't know. But Black people wearing blackface, if they were in white films, depending on the role or whatever, that actually did happen. That was real.
Was that to obscure the fact that they're actually Black?
I have no idea what that is.
In this movie, it was very explicit. You saw them talking to each other before they put the blackface on.
Yeah, and then they put the blackface on. Yeah. My guess is that it comes from the minstrel shows of the 1880s and 1890s, and the purpose was to over personify the fact that you're Black. In other words, you're not just Black, you are stereotypical Black. So, in the old vaudeville minstrel show days, the makeup was coal black. I mean, nobody is that Black. And the lips were white, and, it was a clown make, basically. So I'm assuming that this is a holdover from that. But even up until the 40s, Black people wore blackface, depending on the situation, even in radio.
Well, that particular scene, though, I really enjoyed. They had this broken down car, and they had this little jabbering exchange. It was really pretty good. I had to listen to it a second time. But I got the DVD through the library system, and they had a voiceover commentator. I don't know if any of you might have heard that, but he basically said just what you did, Ron, that they were basically just almost copying the blackface tradition among white actors. They were just doing the same thing, really.
Yeah.
And obviously a caricature, but I love their skit, with that car thing.
Yeah, they were a comedy team, believe it or not, that I'd seen on TV. Okay. God, it must have been in the 50s or maybe the early 60s. But their thing was one would start a sentence and the other would finish the sentence. In
But
other words,
it might not jive with
Yeah.
what was said beforehand. It's like it changes the sense or the topic, and they just keep skipping around, right?
yeah, the skit I saw, one guy says that you need, and the other guy immediately says, yes, I know you do. And then the other guy says something else. And then, in other words, it presupposes that, person number two knows what person number one is going to say before he says it. And if you go back and forth and the timing is right, your head is spinning.
Yeah.
You're wondering how this is happening, but that's the comedy in it.
And then at the end, they said, well, it's wonderful we agree all the time, but there was nothing they agreed to.
Yeah, but there were a comedy team that did that on stage, every so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. When I watched it again, and that was only 2 days ago, the last time I saw that film must have been 15 years ago, apart from the Nicholas brothers. I pay particular attention, I think every dancer did, to the dance steps. I did notice the cakewalk. When she's singing Stormy Weather, there's a Shorty George there, there's a pimp walk in there, it's all there, et cetera. And I just noticed it now because the first time I saw this movie, I was not dancing and was not familiar with any of those. So, dancers would have noticed various things that other people might not. Anyone else? Susan. I'm sorry. Margaret, you're supposed to be refereeing.
Well, I watched it last night too, and although I've seen many of the clips from it, I've never seen the movie in its entirety, and it was fabulous. First of all, I have a dynamic crush on Fats Waller, so to see him was just, I knew he was in it, and sadly enough, he died a few months later.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Very, very sad. What really blew me away that I didn't know about was the Digga Digga Doo performance. Oh my God.
I know, I forgot about that.
I was just like, because the intro, the music doesn't sound exactly like what I'm used to. So I'm watching it thinking, oh yeah, what are they gonna do? And next thing I see, they're doing Digga Digga Doo, and I'm like, whoa! And I did notice that they do say, I forget what word they use, but they don't use the word, how can there be a virgin isle? They don't use the word virgin, they use some other word, tropical isle. I don't know, it made me laugh. It was like, of course, a sign of the times. I did notice, and kind of noticed, many of the women, all the women, as a matter of fact, were very light-skinned.
Yes,
Yeah, and a lot of the men were light-skinned, except for the leads, but then again, that's not true. But even so, it was like, really? Is that the best you could do in your casting?
Yeah, well, Susan, not to interrupt you, but in previous shows, we pointed out in almost every film that the people that are stars, that are leading, the people that have the major speaking roles, are all light-skinned Black people. The entertainers up front are light-skinned Black people, etc. And there is a reason for that. I think
whoever's making all that noise, mute themselves.
Yeah, apologies. Someone's
Somebody mute
audio is
themselves.
having feedback. So if you wouldn't mind muting yourself until you would like to speak, that would be very helpful for everyone else listening.
Yeah, no, I was saying that even among in the Black community, there's prejudice against light and dark Black people. So even in the films that were produced, directed, etc., by Black people, the leads are all light-skinned, etc., and the dark-skinned people, if any, are in the background, the villains, and so on and so forth. So that was not an accident, Susan. That's kind of the way it was.
I could get that, unfortunately. And then, of course, because of the way I am, and Ron, I know you're the same way, after I watched the movie, I had to do research on it.
Of course.
And I should have noticed it, but I didn't see it in the band, but uncredited are Coleman Hawkins,
Illinois Jignet.
Tax Killer. It was just...
All the people
a frustrating experience. How did you people get in? I've been trying for almost half an hour.
There was a mistake in the link set out, and there was Set, you're not the only one, so don't worry about it. It's gonna be okay.
How much did I miss?
You did not miss a lot. We waited a good 10 to 15 minutes for people because we knew there was an upset. So no need to worry.
By the way, parenthetically, and Steve, wherever you are, you noticed this. I wonder if anybody else noticed the war bonds ad at the lower right corner at the end of the film. Just to remind you, it's 1943 and World War II is still on, and we still don't know who's going to win. So, that whole war was financed by war bonds, not by the government, or at least not directly by the government. So many films, including this one, had a little, buy war bonds thing on the bottom right corner of the thing. You would have missed it. The film is over, but the credits are rolling, I believe, and that little ad is there. Steve noticed.
Yeah.
Not bad.
That actually worked into the plot. The whole, I don't know if it's the whole second half, but all the performances at the end were at a big bash, I think, for war bonds, and they gave little pitch.
It was for sending the soldiers off to war.
Yeah.
Yes, it
The
was.
whole movie
That's
like
what it was.
wars.
Yeah, that owes to the fact that it is 1943. It's the middle of World War II, and
and it starts with the soldiers coming home from the First World War with the band. And, and it struck me that I don't know the history of dance in detail, but it seemed to be like a real progression of the history of dance through that movie.
It was.
And I thought that was great with the costumes and everything.
Sure. Well, in the beginning, in the parade sequence, that's real. That's real footage. I mean, that's not, that's not shot for the movie. But once they got to the dance hall, a lot of the dances they were doing were period dances done, before 1920. That's kind of what you did. Notice there's no swing there. It's that would have been out of character.
Although Bill Bojangles Robinson, as soon as he got out of the car, he said, "I'm going to go Lindy Hop till I drop," or something like that.
Oh my God! Yeah, I missed that.
1918.
I heard that.
1918. That would not have happened.
Right.
No.
And people think I'm strange for picking up on like weird costume inaccuracies.
Yeah.
If you can pick up on someone saying Lindy Hop before Lindy Hop was invented, that's
at least 14 years too soon.
It's our job.
There you go. Yeah.
So I miss that. I don't miss much, but I might watch the whole film just to see that again, just to hear him say Lindy Hop in 1918, because it's about 14 years at least, off the mark.
It's right when they're getting out of the limo, Ron, to go into the first dance.
Right. And notice that this is probably the only film, maybe one other, that has a total black cast. Even the black films that we had watched had at least one or two white people in it, for whatever reason. But this one, entirely black. And none of them are actually actors. They are all entertainers. They are musicians, they're dancers, they're singers, but none of them. In fact,
let me add, I watched actually the other day Bob Calloway, his Heidi Ho, and that's also completely, entirely black cast.
Yeah.
Just wonderful dancing, singing, tapping, terrific. So no, this is not the only one.
Yeah, I don't know if any of those people have ever been in another film. I mean, I'm probably wrong about that, but again, none of them are actors. They're all, entertainers that have been around for a very long time, except for Lena Horne, who's an ingenue, basically, in the film.
Ron, don't forget, what's his name? Thanks.
What's his name? Yeah.
Old, what's his name? Dooley Wilson.
Dooley Wilson, yeah. He
was not a singer at all, despite the fact that he sang the big song in Casablanca. He has no musical talent whatsoever.
I meant to bring that out. You might recognize Dooley Wilson from Casablanca, the old, Play It Again, Sam, which is never said in the movie, but that's Dooley Wilson, yeah. And But what I did notice is also, it's kind of obvious. The plot is really nothing. It's boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy, or I should say, old man meets girl.
Exactly. Yeah.
Bojangles is cool enough to be a grandfather. But boy meets girl, boy doesn't get girl, boy eventually gets girl, and everybody dances away happily. I mean, the plot really is as thin as can be. The whole movie is just one big, entertainment, vehicle.
Like a showcase kind of setup.
I mean,
That's the term.
Yeah, it's a showcase. Cavalcade of stars. That's in every Black person just about in that movie was a star in his or her own right at the time, except for Lena Horne, who was, may have, done a couple of things, not movies. I think this was her movie debut. And I don't know if she's ever been in another movie, probably has. But
a handful. There was the note with the YouTube. I watched it via free on YouTube, and some people put some notes in that one. There's a 40-year age difference between Lena Horne and her suitor, and that Lena Horne, it was one of only 2 movies that she didn't do for one of MGM, I think, the one studio that owned her contract. But this was one of only 2 movies she got was allowed to do when she wasn't under contract. She's only been in 5 or 6 movies, and generally, she's just the singer type of thing. She doesn't, this is probably the most acting I would bet she got to do.
Probably.
She was Glinda in The Wiz.
Oh,
it was. Okay.
I think I saw a PBS documentary that talked about how stingy MGM was with her as far as performances were concerned.
Okay.
They kept her really controlled and gave her very small chances. It was a PBS documentary on how much trouble Black women had from Hattie Daniels on to get real parts in film. And she was like the last example of somebody who was great but treated badly.
Yeah, I also read up on her as well, and she would be in, and it harkened back to something that Ron had said about Black films. They would always cast her as something that had nothing to do with the plot, where she could just stand against a tree and sing, so that they could then cut her out when they were sending the film down south.
Hard to do in this
okay, right. Then again, to be a female actress in the studio system wasn't a very good situation for any female actress.
Yeah.
No, there were very few. Betty Davis was one who really challenged and won, the studios. There were a few others, but most actors and actresses were held under strict contract. The studio owns you. And the studio system didn't really end until the 60s, or it didn't begin to weaken until then, et cetera. It held a real hold on actors for, a very long time. But, Black actors were very often not under contract at all, as evidenced by a lot of the films that we've seen prior to this. If you made it to contract, that was success. No matter how tight a hold they had on you, you actually had a contract. That was a
I was gonna say, I'm sure that lots and lots of actors, Black and white, stood on their heads and juggled flaming, spears to get a contract.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just a little off the topic, but Lincoln Perry. A lot of people criticize him for doing what he did in the 30s, but he was the first Black actor to make $1 million. By the way, Lincoln Perry's stage name was Stepin Fetchit. He got a lot of criticism for stereotyping Black people, but during the Depression, he was
made a lot of money.
when a lot of white people were standing on bread lines, so I can't fault him too much.
Yeah,
but
speaking of the Depression, I just happened to have watched an episode from PBS on the history of jazz, and it was talking about Duke Ellington during the Depression, and his manager somehow actually got him and his band were the first black orchestra or band that ever showed up on a mainstream movie lot. And talking about circling back to blackface, it was an African-American movie with all the characters were that. It wasn't a main, it wasn't intended for white audience, but still they were so nervous about having a black band playing that two of the members of the Duke Ellington band were told that they had to, quote, black up. They had to put blackface on because on screen, black and white, they weren't looking dark enough.
Yeah.
So that made them black until they were looked as black as the naturally black member of the, orchestra or band to play.
Yeah.
They were afraid that they would get trouble from theaters if they showed the band playing for the actors to dance was a integrated band.
Yeah, well, they needed to be as black as the audience wanted them to be, or as the studio felt that, most audiences wanted them to be, which is blacker than black. So yeah, that happened throughout the 40s.
And continued when they filmed West Side Story. Rita Moreno, they told her she was too light skinned. They had her wear makeup to make her look darker. So happened past the 40s too.
And then getting back to Lena Horne, they would not cast her in Showboat as the character who is
Magnolia.
actually biracial.
Yeah, that was Ava Gardner.
Julie.
So they cast Ava Gardner.
Ava Gardner.
And darkened her. Huh.
So they'd rather darken Ava Gardner rather than, cast Lena Horne, who was the right shade. Because
had already done the part on Broadway or someplace, I think.
And then they couldn't even use Ava Gardner's voice because she couldn't sing. So they had to dub it.
By the way, Lena Horne may have been the last person to sing Stormy Weather. I mean, on screen or wherever. That song is not as old. I mean, it is much older than the movie. And a lot of the people sang it, predominantly Black people. Ethel Waters sang it, Louise Beaver sang it. So it goes back to the 20s. But I think this movie really, put it on top. And aside from the two I just mentioned, after Lena Horne, I never heard anybody sing it, although I'm sure, people have. But yeah. So, like I said earlier, it's the only movie I've shown, I think, that has a completely Black cast, and it's a Hollywood movie. I mean, everybody behind the scenes is white. If you read the credits.
So I was wondering about that, Ron. So, we've seen these Black race films, as they were called, that were by by Black actors and directors for a Black audience. Here's a film made in Hollywood by white people with Black actors. Who was the audience intended to be?
The audience was intended to be white people.
Yeah, I think so.
And at this point, keep in mind, this is the latest film we've shown, 1943. Also in 43, Cabin in the Sky came out. So another reason I showed this movie now is because at this stage of the game, we are leaving the movies that, Oscar and others, have shown, and entering what I would call a gray area. Black people are falling out of that, stereotypical role, even though there's lots of stereotypes in Stormy Weather. And you'll see in the late 40s, early 50s, Black people are creeping into serious roles. And it's not until the middle 50s that really happens. But, I think white producers are beginning to see the dollar signs involved in Black entertainment. Keep in mind, this film is chock full of veteran entertainers, that seem to have made a lot of money in their own right. Put them all together and you've got a blockbuster in terms of, what, white producers, would have thought. So somebody in Hollywood would have thought maybe, hey, let's do this. Let's see what happens. Okay. And again, a lot of these entertainers made, a lot of money for white people. They performed for white audiences, particularly Bill Bojangles Robinson, white people listened to Cab Calloway. You know, people were doing Lindy Hop in 1943, and Cab Calloway.
Going to the Cotton Club. In fact, it was odd to see him, you know, in his what was supposed to be like a Cotton Club type thing, but the entire audience was black, which wouldn't have been in the Cotton Club.
That is true. That would not have happened. And keep in mind, you know, Cab Calloway, you know, took over for Duke Ellington at the Cotton Club as the house band. You know, yeah, so it's very much, you have to put yourself back in the 1943 mindset. You know, people want entertainment.
I want to mention the Zoot Suit. I know I've heard of Zoot Suits, but Cab Calloway just blew me away. I mean, that was such a classic outfit.
Then I recommend that you watch Heidi Ho, which is basically Bob Calloway, both and acting and singing.
All right.
I just want to say that Stormy Weather, there is a recording from 1962, which was Ella Fitzgerald, and Billie Holiday did it in 1952. So it was not the last time and last person who sang it.
Yeah, I didn't think it was, but I mean the famous version is Lena Horne and this sort of thing. And you don't often hear that song for whatever reason, but you know, who better? Billie Holiday singing Stormy. It's a torch song, you know.
Well, so is anything that Billie Holiday does? Unfortunately, everything is a torch song.
Exactly right. Who better? Yeah, you know, so you know, that's absolutely right.
And even though it's a good song and a good singing, the watching that segment, oh my God, that is not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, like I just mentioned, that's a torch song, and a torch song is basically is always sung by a woman about the man that got away, you know. And the style, I think, originated back in the 1920s. You know, Ruth Etting was a famous torch singer who sang those types of songs. She wasn't the only one; she's just the one that comes to mind. But that's a true torch song, and you know, only a woman can do that.
Or Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra can do a torch song too.
Really?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess so. 2:45. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should bring back Zoot Suits.
Amen.
We did it in the 80s. The early Lindy Hoppers all were doing the Zoot Suits. Chester has one. I think Ron has one, don't you, Ron?
I don't have one. I'd like one. I keep threatening to buy one. But whoever mentioned, I think, Alan, you mentioned when, you know, Cab Calloway came on with the Zoot Suit. That was fantastic. And that dance sequence that were done by in the nightclub at the end, you know, that was fantastic. I was watching the steps. I wish I could slow it down so I could mimic them. That's a great routine, Chester. You know, if you could do that.
Beautiful.
I see you, Susan. I see you, and you are so excited about what you have to say. So I see you. She's had her hand raised for about 30 seconds. So I'm going to let Susan jump in.
Okay, I'll say it quickly. So yes, I'm glad you mentioned that dance routine where they were wearing zoot suits. But how about those women in their heels that were doing those steps? Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Give them credit. They didn't beat. They were right. It was just. It almost kind of makes you want to wear heels. They did it so well. It was beautiful.
I know what you mean. But no, I'll say it again, that the watching that movie, because I haven't seen it in at least 10 or 15 years, watching it now, I have a real appreciation for what those people had to do to get those routines, to get them down. Even though they're professionals, those are not easy routines. And everybody is in step. I noticed that, you know, so I wish I knew those steps. I wish I could slow down the movie and just, you know, copy those steps.
Ron, it's not that hard to slow down the movie. It's on YouTube. It's on YouTube, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
I wonder if I can slow it down enough to catch the steps, but those routines were something.
So what do people think about the Nicholas brothers?
Well,
they were a great source of what to do next for Fred Astaire. He absolutely adored them.
Yes, he did.
And you mentioned Fred Astaire. Supposedly, after this movie, Fred Astaire went to the Nicholas brothers. They were friends, and he told them this was the most exciting tap number he had ever seen.
That he ever saw, yeah.
Bill, you had a comment.
I just want to go back for a second to what you said a minute ago, Ron, about how you always wanted a zoot suit.
Yes.
Just as a kind of interesting historical note, early in 1988, you and I had a fight with my girlfriend at the time because she would not allow us to wear zoot suits at our wedding. Not our wedding, meaning you and me, but me and
you and her. Yeah.
So we tried. We would have looked awesome, but she nixed it. So
I would have looked great doing the pit walk down the aisle.
Perfect. Would have been great.
If you guys ever do a second marriage, we're on.
Hey, going back to that Nicholas brother Fred Astaire thing, I just recently passed around a clip of it was sort of like in the back areas of the studios, and they were all just tap dancing. Yeah. So that's going around Facebook. Yeah.
And for those that don't know, it's Fred Astaire and the Nicholas brothers as kids. I think the oldest one is like 15 or so, and the youngest one is, I don't know, 12 or whatever. And they're playing around, they're tapping, they're doing kinds of stuff. So it's obviously the 1930s. So.
If you want to get a really full of a zoot suit, there was a movie in the 80s called Zoot Suit.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it's a very important element of the movie. It's great fun.
Well, I'll just
say if you're into
and it's in color. It's in color, so it really gives it a great flair as far as the suit is concerned.
Seeing as how you're
into podcast.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you're into podcasts and you want to learn more about zoot suits, the podcast Stuff You Missed in History Class a few years back did an excellent episode on the history of zoot suits and the zoot suit riots and how that all tied into race struggles and class struggles and how it affected, why it was affected by the Second World War. So if you're interested in learning more about zoot suits, I recommend that as a starting point.
Yeah, I know quite a lot about that, and I was going to mention that movie you saw references to zoot suit riots in LA in the 1940s. Yeah,
that's what it is
not
about,
a musical. And Edward James Olmos does an excellent job in that movie. But yeah, I'm not going to get into it, but it's a very serious subject. So.
Yeah. Well, when Lindy Hop first had its revival, part of it was actually what came first was the clothes. People were dressed to the nines in the zoot suits and the skirts and everything. And then after a while, it was like, well, okay, if we really want to dance really well, we need to take off these clothes because you can't.
Yeah.
It's funny. I would say just the opposite. People say, "Well, Ryan, why don't you get a zoot suit and go to the dances?" And I would say, walking into a swing dance with a zoot suit is like walking into a pool hall with a handmade pool cue. You'd better know how to shoot pool if you're going to do that. So if you're going to wear a zoot suit to a dance, you'd better know how to Lindy Hop. Otherwise, you're just going to look like a dork.
Now,
I'm still waiting to get good enough to put on a zoot suit and walk out in public in it.
When it first started, nobody was good enough. They just wore the outfits.
Yeah. But I mean, I rarely see people walk, unless it's Halloween or something, I rarely see people walking around with zoot suits. And I have a feeling it's because if you're wearing a zoot suit, you're the center of attention and you'd better be able to dance and dance well. Otherwise, you're just going to look silly.
I used to dance down in Long Island, and there was a bunch of younger people that would come dressed in not zoot suits, but 40s clothes and hairstyles and army uniforms, and they could dance.
Yeah,
they could really dance.
You see that at Swing Out New Hampshire, which is a dance camp. Every once in a while. I mean, you don't go to Swing Out New Hampshire unless you already know how to dance and want to learn how to dance better. So there are people that will dress up in army, World War II uniforms and, the semblance of a zoot suit. I don't think I've seen any zoot suits, but you'll see people with fedoras and wearing suspenders and 40s type pants and stuff like that. So, but they know how to dance.
I wanted to tie in another bit of history that I learned about. I watched this documentary last year, and I'm going to bet Chester and Linda and Ron know about this. But when I was watching, I had like this like prairie dog look up moment when the chorus girls decided to strike because they, you know, they're like, where are our wages? What's going on? And actually, I watched a documentary last year called Been Rich All My Life, and it follows a group called the Silver Bells, which was all women in their 80s and 90s who were the original chorus girls in the 30s and 40s. And they got back together later in life and performed together. But one of the women in that group was the first performer, the first chorus girl to lead a strike for better pay.
Yeah.
So that is totally based off of fact that happened. And I recommend watching it. It's on Canopy. So if you have an LT Memorial Library card, or if you're not part of the Mid-Hudson Library System, Ulster County, if your library has Canopy, I recommend you go on and watch it. It's an excellent documentary about these women, and they're so fabulous. It's wonderful.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the things I noticed with the Nicholas brothers, and Linda cued me to this several years ago, you know, you're lured into watching their feet and watching their bodies. I watched their fingers, their hands and whatnot, and they danced even down to their fingernails. I mean, I don't know. They obviously didn't choreograph that. That's just part of what they do, you know. But their fingers, their hands are so elegant in the way they accentuate the dance, you know, where it just wouldn't look as good if they did not do that. Now, like I said, that's probably a reflex of what they've been doing for years. And the other thing that knocks me out every time I've seen that sequence, and I've seen it 100 times, is how do you jump into a full 180 split and then without using your hands? How does that happen?
Walk away with that.
Oh, so much muscle.
How do you
over the step, over each other. Ouch.
And then they levitate out of it. They levitate, they like bring their legs together and rise up out of it.
Rise up.
Yeah.
You know,
I did dance for 13 years and I am about to be 27 and I already feel it. I already have problems because of it. I was like watching that, like I cannot believe what I am watching.
Right. The first time I saw that, I said, that can't be real. Nobody can do that, you know. And they do over and over and over again. I mean, it's not like a one-shot deal where, hey, maybe I didn't see that. Nope. They are jumping down the stairs, landing in a full split, getting up and doing it over and over again. And I'm thinking, oh no.
Ron, if you watch
Chester, I just want to talk about, so Chester and I saw Fayard Nicholas in Washington, D.C. When he was up there. He was up there in age, and he had a couple of hip replacements.
Not surprisingly.
Not surprisingly.
Yeah.
But he talked about how the hands were a very important part of the whole presentation, and you never saw the Nicholas brothers dressed casually. I mean, they were always dressed beautifully. And he actually performed. He could no longer tap dance. He performed with his hands for us. And it was, just amazing.
That's a whole dance in itself. You know, that's that has to be.
Yeah.
But no, they've got to be the best tap dancers I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of them. And I remember watching a special where Gregory Hines gave them tribute. You know, and he's no slouch himself.
Gregory, huh?
Well, Gregory and Maurice Hines were supposed to be the next Nicholas brothers.
Yeah, right.
Huh.
Yeah.
Hines and Dad. Their father.
You're right.
Hines and Dad.
Yeah, they appeared on the Sullivan show.
They worked up in the Borscht Belt all the time. But what do you think about Sammy Davis Jr. relative to his tap dancing?
I recently saw a clip of somebody's got their
yeah, someone's having feedback again. If you wouldn't mind muting yourselves.
Yeah. I saw Sammy Davis Jr. within the last couple of months on a clip. And I always liked Sammy Davis Jr. He's a fantastic dancer, but this is probably the best thing I've seen him do. He was with an orchestra and whatnot, and he did a fantastic dance sequence, tap sequence, which was absolutely amazing. But what else he did is he played the xylophone or the vibraphone as good as Lionel Hampton, and the drums as good as Gene Krupa. He did all three, one right after the other, and they were all spectacular. And I've been watching Sammy Davis Jr. for years. Who hasn't? I mean, he's all over the place. But this was the best thing I've seen him do. And it only lasted about 10 minutes, but he did all three. And that tap dancing sequence that he did, it almost looked like he made it up on the spot. But it was spectacular. It was above superior.
Ron, only 10 minutes, you say? 10 minutes is a long time.
Yeah. So only 10 minutes. But
so what was this clip a part of? Do you remember?
I don't know. I think I just don't know. Because Sammy Davis Jr. blew everybody away. It might have been a Frank Sinatra thing. I think it was during the Rat Pack days.
Okay.
And I think he might have been. I don't think it was Ed Sullivan, but it was an Ed Sullivan-like thing, and people.
So remember on Sunday nights, opposite Ed Sullivan was the Colgate-Palmolive Pete Hour, and they would have a different host every week. Like they would have Eddie Cantor or Red Skelton or, Frank Sinatra. I don't know about him. And he would be on that a lot as a guest. But I saw a movie clip of him when he was a kid dancing.
So have I, yeah.
Junior, and that's the one that I thought was so amazing.
Yeah, I've seen that clip too. I mean, assuming it's one clip. It's early 30s. He's like 5 years old, and that sort of thing.
That's the movie Chester and I just saw. He's with Ethel Waters.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember. I may have only seen the clip. I think I've only seen the clip. I haven't seen the movie, but yeah, it's 30s. He's like 5 or 6, and he's dancing. So it seems like if you want to dance that well, you got to start at the age of. You got to start prenatal. You got to start in the womb. Otherwise, this doesn't happen.
Ron, that was the movie I had brought up in our last meeting because it was a black film, black cast for a white audience, where all the black cast members were just so stereotypically presented, their dialogue. I mean, it was such stark contrast to the things we had been watching. Yeah,
but getting back to the film, and the time the film was done, somebody asked this question or made this comment earlier. It is 1943, and it's no longer the 30s, and I'd like to do some research on this. But the films that Black people are in are not exactly like the films that we watched and whatnot. Black people are breaking out of that. It may have been because Hattie McDaniels won the Academy Award in 1940, but somehow that's not it. That's not it alone. Or what I think it's probably due to is that Black audiences are getting sick and tired of being stereotyped. And in the 40s, they're kind of breaking out of that. Of course, they've got World War II to compete with, and, segregation is still, a big deal. But from what I have been able to glean, there are Black people that are protesting the films that we watched that came out of the 1930s. They're no longer going to see them, or at least, they're speaking out against them, probably in the churches and whatnot, where, ministers are making sermons about this. And, there are a lot of Black people that are just, saying, hey, we're second-class citizens and that ain't right, especially since you're drafting us and sending us over to Europe to fight and die. So I think that's, that all of that conspires to ring the death knell to the movies that we have been watching, but there's nothing to replace it. Except, Stormy Weather, Cabin in the Sky. There may be one or two other films, and that's it. And this doesn't emerge again even a little bit until the late 40s. Then it comes sort of on its own, in the 50s, where Black people are now beginning to appear in films as non-stereotypes. They rarely star in them. Sidney Poitier, I mentioned, several months ago, is one. There are a few others, but this is certainly not a trend. It's just not stereotype anymore. So
I think in the 40s, the economy was better and they were working, and I think they had more money to
I
go
was
to
just
the movie.
thinking that.
Yes.
And
Hollywood follows the dollar.
Yes, it
and
does.
they had it to spend.
Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, Hollywood saw, putting all of these entertainers in one movie would make big bucks. I don't know if it did or not. I don't know how Stormy Weather did at the box office. I assume it did fairly well. But again, putting all of those entertainers in one movie, was a way of making a lot of money. And like you said, people have more money to spend. It's, the war means prosperity for a lot of people.
Ron, or anyone who can answer this, given you brought up the box office, do we know if either this movie, Stormy Weather, or Cabin in the Sky played south of the Mason-Dixon line?
I don't know. I would guess no.
Yeah.
I would guess no, because first of all, it stars all Black people. And second of all, very few of them are stereotypical.
Right.
It's not what racist Southerners want to see. And I say racist Southerners because not all Southerners are racist, but somehow, and I can't prove it, research might bear this out. But Cabin in the Sky, maybe, but Stormy Weather is not what a racist anyone, Southern or Northern or whatever, would want to see.
So what that means is the studios that made these movies with an all-Black cast knew they were sacrificing a huge market by doing it.
Probably. I think they were, gambling on what I said earlier about putting so many, entertainers in one film that it would offset the people that would not go to see an all-Black movie. And keep in mind, Southerners wouldn't see an all-Black movie anyway. Right. So it's, and I don't mean Southerners per se, because not all Southerners are racist or whatever. That's a generalization, but it's the 1940s, and keeping in mind, there are a lot of people in the North that don't want to see white Black people in in anything but a stereotypical role also. So they may have been banking on the idea that a lot of Black people will go to see this movie, seeing as how all of these stars, with the possible exception of Lena Horne, are well known in the Black community.
I'm thinking that by the 40s, the Great Migration has really built up the Black audience in the North.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that you just have a bigger audience without worrying about the South.
Well, keep in mind, the Black people in the South go to movies also, and they go to Black theaters and whatnot, so they would have seen the movie. But you're right, the Black migration, still goes on.
So,
and in the 40s, obviously it went on because the manufacturing is happening in the North, and there are manufacturing jobs are going begging because of the war.
If they didn't show the movie, would they be able to show the movie just for Black people in the South? Is that something that would happen? Do you know?
Yes and no. I don't know if it happened or not, but there were Black theaters in the South as well as the North. So
separate theaters, separate theaters.
Yeah. They were. Oh, in fact, they were segregated. A Black man could not go into a white theater in the South. In certain areas of the South anyway. So, but it would have been easy to, sell the film to a Black, theater,
mm-hmm.
For Black people. I think they could have done that easily. And they may have counted on that.
Did anyone check IMDb? Doesn't IMDb say how, how many tickets the movie sold or anything like that?
I just didn't look it up. I didn't. Yeah.
It'll tell you how much money the movie made.
Right. 1.5 million.
Was that a lot then?
Well, that, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know, but that's what it claims.
I looked at that, but it said 1.5 million in rentals, so I don't think it was the money
Oh.
from
Oh,
the
you think
original
that's a
premiere.
rental?
Yeah,
That's what you
1.5 million is not a lot of money even in.
Well, I saw 1.5
No.
million. It said rentals after that, so.
Wonder what it costs to make.
I was about to say, if you look at the movie from a money point of view, it would have cost a lot of money to make that movie. I mean, if you just look at the sets, let alone hiring, because these are top actors. I mean, what would Fats Waller have, charged to appear in a movie? Given the fact that it's to his advantage to do that because he gets seen by more people, but he's an established star. Likewise, Calloway. Likewise, Bojangles. Bojangles had been around for decades, and he would have commanded top dollar. He could have, black, white, or otherwise. So
he did.
Yeah.
Ron, you mentioned how almost all the actors are very well known, and when I listened to the commentary version, that man said it was like watching an NBA All-Star game. For the Black community. I mean, these were the cream of the crop, the best out there.
Yeah, they were. I mean, they had vaudeville teams doing it. Like I said, those guys in blackface, they were a comedy team at the time, and long after the movie, they stayed that way. So there were a lot of people in that movie who, were established entertainers, and they probably scoured the casting rooms for Broadway. Because a lot of those dancers in the background, they were not established entertainers. They're probably hungry for work, but they were there. So there were a lot of people, that they got for that. Anyone else? Any other comments? Like I said, I may have said, the only reason I showed that movie is because I want to see the Nicholas Brothers again. And, I also wanted to show a movie that, you don't have to look too closely at it, although we all did, Thanks again, Steve, for that, war bonds. But there's nothing hidden here. It's boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl, and they all dance away happily ever after. That's the movie,
And that's how it should be.
Yes, that's the movie, and there's no hidden plots or any twist or anything like that. And yet the entertainment is first rate.
I would recommend for really first rate entertainment also that Bob Calloway, Heidi Ho, which is totally black, and it's terrific entertainment and dancing, and it has a story, boy, girls, and so on, but it's okay. And then, of course, there is this terrific movie, which is not just black, New Orleans, with Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday, which is marvelous.
Okay. Do you happen to know what years these movies came out?
Yes.
Willing to,
New Orleans was 1947.
I was going to say, I'm willing to bet it's the 1940s, if not the late 1940s.
Yeah, 1947.
Yeah.
Heidi Ho was 1934.
Oh, really? 1930, that early? That I want to see.
That is what it is listed on as IMDb, and
Okay.
as well as Wikipedia.
Yeah, I would not have guessed that, so I'll have to watch it.
I will say, I was looking at where they got the figure for the rentals, and they actually link back to a fabulous website called archive.org, which has a bunch of old books and documents that people have scanned and put up. I'm a collections manager, so this is the kind of stuff that interests me. And they actually got that figure from a 1944 edition of Variety. So that isn't rentals, from when it came out to now. I'm wondering, but I'm not quite sure what they mean by rentals then, because you weren't going out and renting movies and bringing them home and watching them on a Friday night.
No, that's a theater
So
rental.
that figure is a little more accurate than
Well, theaters would
50
rent
years
movies.
of the movie being
Theaters
out.
would rent them from the.
Nice catch.
Yeah.
This is the thing I do. I'm the archives person. So
Heidi Ho, I'll tell you, was done in also 1947. So that was a big year
Oh, I thought you said it was 1934.
No, somebody said something was 34, not me.
Oh, okay, because I was going to say, those movies to me sound like late 40s movies.
Yeah.
They would not have come out earlier. But like I already said earlier, during the late 40s, you had movies like that coming out. And after that, I'm thinking 1949 in particular, now you have serious movies that have Black people, with, serious roles in them, which didn't happen before. So post-World War II.
Cab Calloway was in 2 movies called Heidi Ho. That's why there's confusion.
Oh, really?
Yes, he was in a 1934 short film, and then about 13 years later, did another film called Heidi Ho.
Feature film. Yeah, short films were not, this is something we haven't discussed. Short films were not unknown in any community, particularly the Black community. They were almost like moviola type movies where you could put a coin in and watch them. This sounds like it's bigger than that, but you're not talking about a feature film. You're talking about a short film.
The 1934 is a short film.
Yeah.
The 1947 is a feature length.
That's a feature. Yeah, that now it makes more sense, because I would have said 1934 is kind of early for that. But I would assume that the short film was for a Black audience. Would have been shown in a Black theater, almost as a B-side or just a short, which did exist back then. In 1947, you're talking about a bigger movie for a wider audience.
Yes, because you have entertainers who are very famous by then, and everybody will go and watch them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you said, you have an audience.
Especially seeing Billie Holiday, actually it's very rare.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay, people, anything else? I think we've talked quite a lot about this. We can continue this. I don't have a problem with it. Anybody else has anything else to say?
Well, can I just bring something up about a couple of production things about the movie?
Sure.
2 things. Alan, you mentioned Cab Calloway's white zoot suit. Something that was done there that was very common at the time was that in real life, that zoot suit was bright yellow. And he was well known for wearing that. I have an album of his where he's wearing it on the cover of the album. And it's white shows up as gray and bright yellow shows up as bright white on black and white film. So they let him wear his bright yellow zoot suit. So he's just, blindingly white on that. Anybody who remembers the Nixon Kennedy debates knows that lesson. And the same thing happened in going back to Dooley Wilson. The same thing happened in Casablanca. The piano that Dooley Wilson plays in Casablanca was bright yellow, so it shows up as bright white. And when Ted Turner first started colorizing movies, his first pass at colorizing Casablanca, they just went back to the art director's notes. So if you're lucky enough to or unlucky enough to find an early colorized version of Casablanca, the piano was bright yellow, which it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be white. The other thing I want to mention was early on in this conversation, when we were first talking about the cakewalk, and this kind of pulls it back to the fact that this is a Black movie. And somebody was talking about the actresses or the dancers, the women, about how they all looked fairly light-skinned. And that was no accident. They were all uniformly light-skinned because in something that probably most of us, or those of us on the lighter side, probably don't think about a lot, the lighting director and the cameraman had to make sure that every one of those Black female faces showed up exactly the same way, because Black people are a lot harder to light than white people in a movie. Really? And if you're trying to throw light across a big stage with 24 female dancers, every one of those faces had to appear the same, or it would look like you had some people dancing in the dark. So that wasn't just a question of, that's who was dancing at the time. It was very intentionally cast that way so that they all showed up the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes photographic sense.
You mentioned a cakewalk, and I was going to bring this up. Does everybody know what a cakewalk is? It's it's in the movie, and it's a kind of a high stepping, strut. And for a lot of years, people thought that was making fun of Black people or the Black stereotype. A bit of history, it isn't. This goes back probably to slavery times when the slaves and Black people would have observed highfalutin white people who would strut around with their thumbs in their suspenders and their chest puffed out. And one of the amusements that Black people had then was mimicking white people without white people knowing it. So rather than walking around like this, as they may have seen, the boss, the overseer, whoever, they would exaggerate that and, really kick their heels up and really, puff their chests out and sway back and forth. And the term cakewalk came from the idea that usually on Sundays, when Black people, were allowed to congregate and dance and whatnot. One famous area is Congo Square. I believe that's in New Orleans. That goes back to, the 18th century or whatever. But that's where slaves and free Black people hung out, danced and whatnot, and impressed each other. And even on the plantations, the cakewalk got to be so famous and so funny that whoever could do the fanciest and funniest cakewalk with facial expression and the whole without falling over won a cake. So somebody would
That's where that expression comes from. That takes the cake.
Yeah, it takes the cake because the cake was the prize. If you could do the cakewalk and better than anybody else, etc., you won a cake, and it became known as the cakewalk. And yeah, you're quite right, Linda. The expression "he takes the cake" meant he did the best cakewalk, and but that's where it comes from. It's not Black people, just acting silly. It's Black people imitating white people and laughing their heads off about it. That's what a lot of those dance steps are about. But the cakewalk is the most obvious example of it.
And it's a side note for all you dance historians out there. That's a very similar story to where square dancing and contra dancing came from. It was mocking the rich people that in the old country in Europe, that the servants had to serve and take care of. Think all of those Pride and Prejudice movies, and even before that, when they would have the big balls and the galas, and how slowly they moved with all their skirts. Square dancing and contra dancing is just the people out in the back 40 with their fiddles making fun of the uppity, rich folk they have to take care of, and it turned into its whole dance form.
Yeah,
Cake didn't survive quite as well.
Anyone else? Lively discussion. So, like I said,
by the way, the New Orleans 1947 is on YouTube if you want to see it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Recommendation.
Well, I have to sign off, but I want to thank everybody. This was great. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, and I want to thank Ron and John and Margaret for bringing this. It's been a great series.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. A round of applause if you don't mind me.
Thank you. And before you leave, I just want you, I'm sure everybody knows about this, but on the 19th of this month, which is a Friday, again, it's an Elting Memorial Library production, Harlem's Contribution to Black History in Music and Dance. And I'll be presenting this. I should say me and Margaret, we'll be presenting this. There'll be film clips, YouTube clips that I'll have to dig out and remember and whatnot. And we did this a year ago, and we had to figure out how to do it on Zoom because a year ago we did it at the library, but we're doing it again, and it was fun to do. So I hope everybody, can join us. So it's on 7:00 Friday, February 19th. Okay, and I'll be doing this again off the top of my head, just stuff that I know, but stuff that I love. It's the history of Lindy Hop, it's dance, and it's Harlem, the community that I grew up in, et cetera. So if you can join us for that, we'd love it.
We'll get
Terrific.
about it.
Thank
The
you.
registration link is in the chat, and I will make sure I send it out in the follow-up email. The follow-up email will
Ron,
have.
Sorry,
this
and
week it will
Ron, I
not-
noticed that you have another program next Tuesday.
I do.
No, something.
No,
I just got signed up for something. Wait.
I better hurry up and come up with a program.
Ron's talk for the library is going to be the 19th. That's a Friday evening. The registration link is in the chat. And in the weekly follow-up email, I won't have the link to the next movie we're going to watch, because for now, that's all, folks.
Series.
Maybe this will be coming back. If it does, I will make sure to email the list of everyone who was part of this series.
Oh, okay, I made a mistake. Good.
I've been asked to
I will
do
also
that.
include the links that I put in the chat if you want to learn more about the Zoot Suit rides and Zoot Suits. If you want to learn more about Been Rich All My Life, we threw out New Orleans. There's a bunch of things for you to continue watching on your own, and hopefully after this discussion that we've been having over the past, 4 or 5 months now, you'll be able to pick up on some of the things we've been discussing in your own viewing.
Yeah, I've been asked to continue this, and I'm still thinking about it, Bill. I haven't thrown away the idea. Just so I want to rest a while and, have Tuesday nights to do nothing. I've also run out of movies. And, any movies I reprise now, we might have to pay for. They may not be on YouTube and stuff like that. Whether they'll be black movies or not, I don't know. I mean, I have to put thought into all of this. But the idea of you people watching movies that, I come up with and then coming together like this, discuss them, I really like that idea, which is why I'm thinking about this at all, this sort of thing. So if I come up with an idea, and I'll talk to you about it, Bill, we'll come up with something, maybe. I'll let you all know by email. It'll be in the library newsletter, et cetera, and we'll see what we come up with.
So again, I want to thank Margaret, of course, for all her work she puts into this to make this possible. And Ron, we've really enjoyed it. I just want to thank you so much. It's like Ron gets together with his friends and we have a great time talking about these movies. And it's been wonderful. And thank you so much. And I hope you do revive it.
Oh, well, thank you. I love doing this. It seems like a lot of work, but guess what, folks? It ain't. I just love yakking about things that I'm interested in. It's Margaret that does the behind the scenes work and this sort of thing. I just show up on camera and, start shooting my mouth off about things I like to think I know about, and you people eat it up. So I may continue to do this for that reason alone. You buy what I say.
Hope so. Hope so.
All right.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay,
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye.
We'll see you on the 19th.
Yes.